Chapter 1, The Unseen Threads of Fate. From my earliest days, I yearned for a life less ordinary. I had no desire to drift through existence like most people, yet fate seemed determined to mock me. Born into a mundane family, blessed, or perhaps cursed, with an unremarkable appearance and average intellect, I was all but destined for a life of quiet mediocrity. The realization gnawed at me, a dull ache of boredom that whispered I'd never escape the ordinary. I craved something, anything, different. Perhaps not the grand adventures of tumbling into another time or world, meeting extraterrestrials, or discovering uncharted lands as in the books I devoured, but surely there had to be something to set me apart. Yet, after 20 years of living, nothing remarkable had ever happened, not once. My most distinctive trait, it seemed, was my insatiable longing for the extraordinary, paired with the irony that I remained stubbornly unexceptional. Enough preamble, let's get to the heart of it. For at last, something occurred, something most might never encounter in a lifetime. It began on an utterly typical day as I made my way home from an outing. A car accident shattered the monotony. But let's not call it remarkable. Let's call it misfortune. I was aboard a public bus when it collided with a freight truck. The damage wasn't catastrophic, the bus merely skewed sideways and slammed into the highway guardrail. I'd chosen a seat near the front by the window, a precaution against my motion sickness, but that choice proved my undoing. The front of the bus bore the brunt of the crash, and I was caught in the chaos, shards of shattered glass and a dislodged window frame raining down upon me. I crumpled to the floor, unable to move, every inch of my body screaming in agony. Trapped beneath debris, I felt suffocated, desperate to sit up, but even the slightest twitch intensified the pain. Resigned, I lay there, inwardly cursing the sluggish ambulance, blaming either the wretched traffic of this sprawling city or the apathy of its emergency services, while glaring at the crowd of onlookers. Their blank, impassive faces stared back, unmoved. I recalled the essays of a certain literary master, his scathing depiction of numb spectators gawking at executions. The spies facing their firing squads must have seen much the same, a gallery of indifference. The ambulance finally arrived. They later told me it took a mere 5 minutes, but to me, it felt like an hour of torment stretched across the asphalt. As they hoisted me onto the stretcher, I couldn't suppress a bitter oath under my breath. The passengers from the rear of the bus, sporting little more than scrapes, sauntered onto the ambulance under their own power, while I was maneuvered like a lifeless husk, utterly helpless. Same accident, starkly different fates. The ride was no reprieve. The shrill wail of the siren pierced my skull, amplifying my headache. When the doctors and nurses appeared, I thought I could finally surrender to unconsciousness, but that infernal ringing kept me tethered to wakefulness. I longed to rip off the oxygen mask and beg them to silence it, but my limbs refused to obey, and I doubted anyone would heed me anyway. Mercifully, anesthesia claimed me at last. When I awoke, I was in a hospital bed, still immobile. My waist, they said, had taken the worst of it, and the lingering effects of the drugs left me weak as a newborn. 3 days I languished there, boredom threatening to smother me. So, when the doctor suggested I could use a wheelchair to explore, I immediately pressed my mother to fetch one. Back then, I considered myself the unluckiest soul alive. Yet now, looking back, I'm grateful for that accident, for the hospital stay, for the wheelchair that let me roam. Because it was through those twists of misfortune that I met him. Life's encounters aren't judged in the moment, they demand hindsight to reveal their worth. Our first meeting came on an early morning. I awoke before dawn, restless, at just past 6. My mother hadn't yet arrived, so, bored out of my mind, I wheeled myself to the hospital courtyard. There he was, also in a wheelchair, a slab of plaster encasing his left leg, a kindred spirit in affliction. Before him stood an easel, his hands coaxing life onto the canvas with strokes of watercolor. He was painting a corner of the courtyard. I've always adored art, though I lack the gift myself. To watch was pleasure enough. His technique was a mystery to me, bold sweeps of color splashed across the paper, chaotic at first. I couldn't discern his intent, but gradually, shapes emerged, and by some alchemy, the scene materialized as if summoned from the ether. Remarkable, I blurted, unable to contain my awe. He didn't react, perhaps too engrossed to hear. I fell silent, content to observe. He finished at 10, after more than 3 hours, during which I'd scarcely blinked. As he gathered his supplies, his gaze dipped to my feet, then snapped up to meet mine. Only then did he seem to notice me. I offered a warm smile and a greeting, "Hello." He tilted his head, considering me for a moment, then gave a faint, sheepish nod before resuming his task. He hung his tools on the wheelchair's handles, dipped his head in farewell, and rolled away. Not a word passed his lips, a pity, I thought. Perhaps he resented the interruption to his solitude. The next morning, I awoke early again, the ward still hushed with sleep. I slipped into my wheelchair and returned to the courtyard, but he wasn't in yesterday's spot. Naturally, he wouldn't paint the same scene twice. I roamed until I found him near the perimeter wall, his focus intense, brush darting across the canvas. What could he be painting? Surely not the drab wall itself? Edging closer, I saw it, a butterfly perched on the stone, its wings a delicate symphony of color. His rendition was breathtaking, the hues blazing like frozen flames. Captivating, almost alive. I could have stared forever, but the creak of my wheels startled the creature. It fluttered upward, circled the courtyard, and vanished beyond the wall. "Sorry," I murmured, watching his wistful gaze follow its flight. No response. Not even a glance my way. Odd, did he truly not sense me behind him? "Hey!" I called softly. Still nothing. He resumed painting, as if alone in the world. Perplexed, I tried again, "Sorry." This time, I tapped his shoulder. He turned, startled, eyes widening as they met mine. He hadn't known I was there. "Sorry, I scared the butterfly away," I said, sheepish. He studied me, then pulled a small leather notebook and pen from his pocket, pressing them into my hands. Confused, I glanced between the items and his face. He pointed to his ear, then waved a hand dismissively. It hit me, he was deaf. Stunned, I stared before scribbling, "Sorry, I didn't know." He read it, took the pen, and replied, "It's fine." "What were you saying?" "Sorry again, I didn't mean to chase off the butterfly." He smiled, a small, gentle curve of his lips. "No matter. It wouldn't have stayed long anyway." His handwriting was neat, elegant, shaming my own clumsy scrawl. I'd favored typing for years, my penmanship neglected since abandoning the arts for science. "Your painting is beautiful," I wrote. "Thank you. I only paint to pass the time here, it gets stifling." "Did you study art?" "I learned a bit as a child, but not anymore. It's just a hobby now." "Why paint so early?" "The mornings are quiet. I can focus without interruptions." "Sorry for disturbing you, then." "You didn't. A disturbance hinders my work, you haven't." "It's fine. Can I watch again? I love your art." "Of course." A pause. "Have you studied painting?" "A little, as a kid, but I've no talent. I gave up." "That's a shame. You might have improved with practice." "No, I know talent matters. Keep painting, I'll stay quiet." He chuckled silently and resumed his work. Though I knew little of watercolors, his skill was undeniable. His fingers wielded the brush like a magician's wand, conjuring vibrancy with every stroke. I watched until 9, when he finished. "Sorry, my family's coming soon. I need to head back." "All right. Will you paint tomorrow?" "If nothing unexpected happens, yes." "Can I come again?" His smile returned, revealing a flash of white teeth, subtle, but striking. "Of course. One question, if I may?" "Go ahead." "You're not hurt there, why the wheelchair?" "My waist is injured, it's not obvious." "I'm quite unlucky, aren't I?" "Why say that?" So I told him about the crash, the glass, the disparity between my fate and the others. "That's not so unlucky," he wrote. "Not unlucky?" "I saw passengers with scratches walk away while I was carted off to the ER." He covered his mouth, stifling laughter. "I'm in Ward 11, Bed 3. Ask the nurse how I got here, you'll see real misfortune." "Can't you tell me?" "Ask her. I can't write it funny enough." Still chuckling, he gathered his things, nodded goodbye, and left. Curiosity burned within me. What calamity could be both tragic and amusing? At noon, when the nurse brought my medication, I inquired. That deaf-mute patient, right? Poor soul, she said. He saw a young woman drop something on the street at night and picked it up to return it. She sped up, so he chased after her. She climbed some stairs, he followed. Then she turned, saw this silent stranger trailing her, panicked, thought he was a creep, and shoved him down the steps. That's how he broke his leg. That evening, restless and alone, my ward mates off watching TV, I wheeled myself to Ward 11. Like mine, it had 3 beds. He sat on the outermost, engrossed in a book. Unsure if we were close enough for this, I approached quietly. He didn't notice. Deafness must be a constant vulnerability. What if I were a thief or worse? Silly thought, no villains roamed these halls. I tapped his shoulder. He looked up, smiled, and waved. I gestured to his notebook, he nodded. I wrote, I asked. That's absurdly unlucky. He grinned. I think so too. You don't seem upset, though. Must bad luck always sour my mood? Not always, but most complain, like me. He paused, then wrote, what's done is done. Complaining only worsens it. I'd rather laugh, it passes quicker that way. You're so open-minded. Most aren't. It's just perspective. I studied him. His face betrayed little, yet his calm radiated contentment. I sighed. You're amazing, cheering up so easily. Is it hard for you? Yes. Life's full of annoyances. Like what? I hesitated, then poured it out. I'm studying science because my dad chose it, but I hate it. I want literature. I can't keep up, my grades are awful. I'd quit, but he'd kill me, and after a year, I hate wasting the time I've sunk into it. That's tough. Why not pick literature initially? I love books, but my memory's terrible, humanities need rote learning. I chose science, then realized I adore writing stories. You write? Yes. My mind's a chaos of tales, my mom says I live in fantasies. I want to be a novelist. Why not study science and write on the side? I've thought of it, but everyone says I'm impractical, dreaming of the impossible. Fitting for someone so ordinary, huh? No. They're wrong. He pondered, then continued, they call you impractical, because your path diverges. They think if most can't do it, you can't either. That's their lack of vision. You don't have to follow the crowd, do what you want. Don't bend your dreams to match theirs. But I'm so average. I don't know if I can. I think you're far from average. You're special. Me? Impossible. You're just comforting me. No, I mean it. You sought me out, that's rare. What? I don't get it. He smiled faintly. You're the first to know I'm deaf and mute and still talk to me. I've few friends, mostly like me. Normal people don't bother, they find me inconvenient. I frowned. That's their fault, prejudice. Ignore them. True, but most think that way. Would you ignore me too? Never. See? Just because most do something doesn't mean you must. Do what feels right, even if it's uncommon. Practical just means what most can achieve, they assume you can't because they can't. Only you know your limits. I gazed at him, truly seeing him for the first time. Propped in bed, his height was unclear, perhaps 5'9" or 10. Early 20s, pale skin, narrow eyes, black hair falling neatly across his face and neck. Like any recent graduate, he wasn't striking, yet his thoughts set him apart. I wanted to know more. What's wrong? He waved the notebook, snapping me from my reverie. I owe you an apology. Why? I came here with an ulterior motive. I write about all kinds of people, I wanted to understand you for my stories, not out of care. No need to apologize. That's innocent, even sweet. It feels like I'm using you. It's not. Don't worry. Ask me anything, I'll answer what I can. You called me special, but you're the special one. Why? Your outlook, it's so different. You're easygoing, unbothered by what others say. I faltered, unsure how to finish without wounding him. He took the pen. You can't lose what you never had. I've been deaf since birth, no loss to mourn. Others assume I should despair, but that's their imagination, not my reality. Really? Yes. We chatted happily until the others returned, and lights out loomed. I bid him good night. That night, sleep eluded me. He was extraordinary, unlike anyone I'd known. I craved more of him. To me, special was a siren's call. Chapter 2, A Moonlit Bond. Thereafter, I became a fixture in his world. Mornings, I watched him paint, other times, I'd visit his ward, or he'd roll into mine. Slowly, I unraveled him. He devoured books, more than I, the aspiring novelist, ever had. His knowledge was vast, and though I was whole and he flawed, he often played the elder, looking out for me. Few visited him, his parents appeared every few days. And his wardmates kept their distance. So I sought him out more, eager to be his friend. Patient and mild-mannered, he wore a perpetual poker face, rarely emoting. I guessed it stemmed from a solitary life, though I never asked. My mother soon noticed. Don't get too close, she warned. I laughed it off. Relax, he's just a friend. I'd never fall for him. Sorry, mother. That was half a lie. His pull was undeniable, and though I didn't love him yet, my fondness grew daily. I knew, inevitably, I would. He was unlike any boy I'd met. One day, I asked, don't you tire of reading? I love books, but not constantly. How could it bore me? What else do you do? In hospital, not much. Normally, I love pop, I scratched it out, remembering. Music, radio, live bands, my joys, were beyond him. TV was limited to subtitles, my college triumphs in speech and debate meant nothing here. Too late, he'd seen. No need to write it. You're a wonderful girl. What? My ex called me the most annoying girl alive. Why? I chased him, but dumped him after 3 months. He said I toyed with him. Did you? No. I liked him at first, not deeply, but I thought we'd fit. Then I saw he didn't. He nagged, demanded every detail of my life, accused me of deceit if I forgot anything. I mistook his fussing for care, his possessiveness for love. You dislike talkative men? Yes. I think up stories while walking, I don't chat. He thought I ignored him. I prefer quiet types. He laughed. Then I'm perfect for you, I can't nag or talk your ear off. My heart raced. I pressed a hand to my chest, praying he wouldn't notice. What about you? Girlfriend? I didn't love him, why this panic, this need to know? Kidding. Who'd want someone like me? Impossible. Relief flooded me, why? I nearly wrote, someone would. Maybe me. But my pen froze. Was I mad, falling for a deaf-mute man? I didn't understand myself. All I knew was my fear had come true, I loved him. Pop music began to haunt me, each note a reminder of his silence, each lyric a trivial whine against my tangled heart. A wiser me would have fled then, but my consistent bottom 10 exam ranks proved I lacked such sense. I was doomed to fall. School started, but my injury forced a leave. I relished the break, though finals would be hell. My parents fretted, urging the doctors to discharge me, but my frail health slowed my recovery. Stuck in the hospital for Mid-Autumn Festival, a time for family, was bitter. I pitted my fate, and him too, his leg healed, plaster off, he'd gone home, while I lingered in this antiseptic prison. I sent my parents back to Grandpa, his years were few, and they mattered more than me. Alone, the ward empty, I skipped the hospital's party. By the window, moon-gazing, I recalled a poet's lament and felt tears prick my eyes. A tap on my shoulder, I turned, expecting a nurse, but it was him. In a tracksuit jacket, tee, and jeans, my first glimpse of him casual, I nearly didn't recognize him. Not for unfamiliarity, but for how striking he looked, appearing like a storybook prince when I needed him most. He'd call it my fanciful nonsense. He held up a mooncake box, smiling, and wheeled me to my bed. Clearing the nightstand, he set out the treats. I grabbed his notebook. Why are you here? Didn't you go home? I saw you nearly crying when I left today. I wasn't. Nonsense. Who was sighing at the moon, then? My eyes failing? Yes, you're blind. I didn't sigh. Oh. Deaf, mute, now blind, I'd be useless. My chest tightened. Why did I blunder so? He waved it off, smiling faintly. Don't worry, I don't mind. Relieved, I relaxed. He sliced a lotus seed mooncake and offered it. I balked, teasing, I hate lotus, it's too sweet. He frowned, puzzled. It's mid-autumn, you have to eat mooncakes. What do you like? I don't like them. If I must, only ice skin white lotus, less cloying. He stood to leave, alarmed. I grabbed him. Where are you going? To buy ice skin mooncakes. I'd only meant to tease his stoic face, not send him off. Sorry, I was kidding. I'll eat lotus. He eyed me, then my note. I hung my head, a guilty child, dreading his departure. But you said you hate sweet stuff. I do, like mooncakes, but I'll eat them, just less. I manage lotus every year. Amused, he patted my head, recut the cake into tiny bites, and handed me one. Small enough to not overwhelm, a thoughtful gesture. I ate, hiding my dislike for the yolk too. I'd rather choke down the lot than let him leave. Once, I'd scorned couples stealing mid-autumn from family. No more. That night, he left his kin to comfort me, a gift beyond measure. Chapter 3, Tangled Hearts and Unseen Paths. The Mid-Autumn Festival faded into memory, and not long after, Percival was discharged. My waist had improved considerably, yet the doctors insisted on a few more days of observation, no wheelchair needed now, just rest and rechecks. My grasp on reality and fantasy, already tenuous, blurred further in those sterile halls. The day he left, I glared at him through the window, hurling all my pent-up frustration in silent waves. He'd been facing away, but as if sensing my storm, he turned, approached, and gently lifted my right hand. With a pen, he scrawled an 11-digit number across my palm, followed by 3 simple words, text me. His smile, pure, guileless, melted my resentment. As he walked away, I stared at the elegant digits and script, closing my hand to trap the lingering warmth of his touch. Boredom plagued my remaining hospital days, so I bombarded him with messages as mundane as my confinement. What are you doing? I'm so bored. Are you bored? Trivial nonsense, perfectly suited to my idle state. If I indulged in impractical daydreams when restless, why not spew equally trivial chatter when bored? He always replied with patience, weaving amusing tales, or waiting as I vented my grievances one line at a time. From then on, I'd say we became good friends, or so I believed. One day, his message caught me off guard. Didn't you once have a cat? A friend's birthday is coming up, and his cat just had kittens. I want to get him something cat-related. Any ideas? I told him the options were endless. Did he have a preference? We texted back and forth, circling without landing on anything concrete, until we agreed to meet the next day to shop for the gift. We settled on the intersection near the hospital road. The weather was mild. He wore a white long-sleeve tee, oversized and draping his frame in a way I found oddly charming. My earlier guess about his height, 5'9", proved wrong. He stood a full 6 feet, his build lean and striking in anything he wore. I arrived on time, but lingered in a nearby alley, stealing glances. He looked so effortlessly good standing there, hands in pockets, that I couldn't resist watching a little longer, not to make him wait, but to savor the sight. 10 minutes late, I might have delayed further if not for 2 girls approaching him for directions. Of all the people on that busy street, they picked him, 2 giggling flirts, no doubt drawn by his looks. His helpless expression spurred me into action. I rushed over, fielding their question with a vague answer. I hadn't a clue where their destination was, but in a city this vast, I doubted they'd track me down to complain. Assuming they didn't get lost following my nonsense directions, that is. Once they left, I turned to Percival, who exhaled in relief. Was that awkward? I wrote. Startled me, they came up babbling, and I couldn't follow. Glad you showed up. Sorry I'm late. No worries. Girls are supposed to keep guys waiting, right? Where'd you pick up that idiot logic? Books always say it, guys wait for girls. Which book? Stop reading that author. I thrust the notebook at him with mock severity, and we headed to the bus stop. I have quirks aplenty, many born from too many comics and novels. With girls, I walk on the traffic side, my tomboy streak insisting I play the protector. With boys, I take the inner path, a decent one accepts it as natural, while a jerk deserves whatever the road throws at him. But with Percival, before I could decide, he'd nudge me inward, claiming the outer edge. I'd protest, insisting he take the safer side, his deafness left him vulnerable to unheard horns. We bickered over it at the roadside until we compromised, both sticking to the innermost pedestrian path, far from traffic. We ended up at the Fongsuan flower, bird, and fish market. I gravitated toward adorable cat outfits, he favored toys. We settled on toys, cute as the clothes were, we agreed cats. Loathed the restrictive nonsense. It reminded me of my high school basketball days. Our class fielded 8 players, I was a star, my 3-step layup earning cheers. Boys said I wasn't girly, girls called me dashing, like a boy. I'd always been a tomboy, shunning skirts. Yet beside his 6-foot frame, my 5'3" felt distinctly feminine, especially in crowds, where he'd grip my arm to pull me back when I drifted, his touch through fabric setting my skin ablaze, my girlish blood simmering with how much I liked him. On the way back, he treated me to lunch as thanks. After months of hospital slop, overpriced, tasteless, dubbed nutritious, I craved bold Western flavors. This is the first time a guy's bought me a meal, I wrote. I'm lucky, then. Idiot, you're not the lucky one, I am. My mood soared until the waitress brought the menu. Percival pointed to a set meal, and she launched her barrage. Sir, coffee before or after? Black pepper, mushroom, or lemon? Sauce? On a sizzling plate? I scribbled her questions, he indicated his choices. Her odd stare made me itch to blacken her overdone face. My spirit sank, why'd I pick this dump? What's wrong? Upset? No. If he didn't notice, why sour his day? Minutes later, I realized he drew eyes across the room. This quiet, refined setting suited him, his gentle, scholarly air, like a kind older brother. His gaze often flicked downward left when lost in thought or dodging a question. What occupied him so deeply beside me? A pang of petty jealousy twisted my gut. He ate with grace, though occasionally a fork scraped his plate, shrieking unnoticed by him. I should have warned him, but when a nosy woman nearby grimaced, I relished it. Then he knocked a bread dish to the floor, not shattering, but spinning with a grating clatter that turned every head. Unfazed, he retrieved it, only then noticing the stares. Why's everyone looking? I laughed until my sides ached. Nothing. You're just too handsome, they can't help it. Quit joking, what's really up? Seriously, it's your looks. My exaggerated cackles left him unconvinced, but my evasive replies, wildly off-topic, eventually wore him down. To spare him the cashier's judgment, I took his wallet to pay. His casual trust, our fingers brushing, nearly short-circuited my brain. Returning it with my left hand, my right still scalded from contact, we left. 200 meters into an alley, a deafening crash jolted me. A motorcycle lay toppled, 2 figures sprawled beside it, blood pooling beneath. A car's roar faded, maybe real, maybe the nearby construction noise. But the wreck and crimson stains were undeniable. Another accident. I froze. Percival followed my gaze, then sprinted toward them. I trailed, legs leaden, each step a battle. I wanted to flee, to unsee it. The blood dragged me back to my own crash, pools of red, a world upended, agony, and those gawking faces that sickened me. I stopped a meter away, unable to go closer. Why did he check on them? Let's go, I can't stay here. My body trembled, heart racing, urging me to run. He glanced back, mimed a phone call, 120, of course. But I couldn't move, eyes locked on the blood, terror rooting me. Others gathered, why me? I wanted out, untangled from this mess. Seeing my paralysis, he pulled out his phone, dialed 120, and thrust it toward me. I recoiled, he pressed it closer. A crisp voice answered, I stammered the location, then stood dazed, clutching the phone. A hand ruffled my hair, I looked up into his gentle face. He checked the bike's tank, no leaks, then sighed in relief. The ambulance arrived swiftly. We watched them load the injured, then left. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I hadn't returned his phone. He studied me, then grasped my free hand, leading me from the alley. His warmth seeped into me, steadying my frantic heart. I nearly wept. It was the first time he'd held my hand so. He escorted me back to the hospital, releasing me only to extend his palm. I returned the phone. "Sorry, did I seem harsh?" he wrote. My hand shook too much to write. I shook my head. "Rest now," he added. I nodded. "Stop that, or I'll think I'm the deaf-mute one." I smiled, meeting his warm gaze. "Can you get upstairs alone?" Another nod. He watched me board the elevator. Compared to my fragility, he'd been a hero. That night, his text came, "Today didn't scare you too much, did it?" "Sorry, I forgot the crash put you here." "I'm fine. I was just cowardly, wanting to ignore it." "Good you're okay." "It's rare, really." "I know. At school, I saw so many disabled by accidents, I'm sensitive to them." Right, his school must have been for the disabled. Wonder if those two will be all right. Me too. Why not follow to the hospital? Kidding, if their frantic kin grabbed me, would it be thanks or a bill? I chuckled, he loved that kidding line. 10 minutes later, another text, "Sorry, I owe you an apology. The gift was an excuse, I just wanted to see you." My heart stuttered. Could I believe it? That my feelings weren't one-sided? I didn't reply, didn't ask. Fear held me, fear of misunderstanding, fear it wasn't a mistake. A line divided us, narrow but daunting. One step could change everything, and I lacked the courage. He never mentioned it again. Sometimes I wondered if I'd dreamed it, but the message lingered in my phone. Had I sent it myself, sneaking his device? No answer came. Chapter 4, The Edge of Forever. 4 days later, I was discharged. Back at school, life dragged, catching up on missed lessons, surrounded by dorm mates giggling over some handsome intern. Once sociable, I now felt out of place, uninterested in their chatter. I only wanted Percival. Seeing him required excuses, flimsy pretexts I piled up. With plenty of friends, I still dragged him shopping or feigned gloom to steal his company. I was sinking in quicksand, free to step out, yet I waded deeper, drawn to its core, him. Time unveiled his quirks. When a cold canceled our movie night at his place, I visited instead. His room stunned me, sparse, black and white decor, a wall-spanning bookshelf the centerpiece, dwarfing a corner easel, scattered canvases, a computer, and him, languishing in bed. He refused medicine, stubborn as stone, insisting colds passed without it. I nearly knocked him out to force it down. Even herbal tea, a staple for locals, earned a rare grimace and fervent headshake after a fast food meal. I grew attuned to details. Movies and TV needed clear subtitles, without them, I'd silently curse the system's neglect of the disabled. Music, theater, comedy, all off limits. No wonder books were his refuge. I never told him I muted the sound, feigning confusion when he questioned unclear scenes, blaming shoddy writing. I haggled for him, shadowed his street crossings with dread, visited only when his parents were out. Technology aided him, a vibrating doorbell. Censor, for one, but some gaps remained. The phone rang unanswered until his father's recorded voice played, deep and magnetic. I'd never hear Percival's. "What's wrong?" He caught me staring at the phone. "Nothing." We straddled two worlds, our habits a chasm I couldn't yet bridge. Sometimes I'd hug him from behind, startling him easy, since he couldn't hear my clumsy approach. Not to scare, but to justify holding him. Other times, I'd shout, watching his still back, feeling unhinged. My eyes would water, longing for him to turn just once. He never did. "I'll learn sign language," I offered. He declined. "It's hard and takes ages. Pentalk's inconvenient." He smiled. "No need, you don't have to. This works." "Why not?" "Because we were just friends?" "What if we weren't?" I didn't ask, staring at that unyielding divide. He never grumbled about fate, but I did. Why him, of all people? "I've complained before," I admitted. "Elementary school changed me. How? My classmates, many from orphanages. Parents abandoned them for defects. Mine didn't, they loved me, poured everything into me. I was proud. TV showed kids far worse off, I'm lucky. God's fair, I lack some things, but gain others. I couldn't respond, I complained for him. What's it like hearing nothing? What's it like hearing everything? Noisy. What's noisy? Like flies buzzing around you. What's that like? I surrendered, waving the notebook. I give up. No more dumb questions. He chuckled, ruffling my hair like a teacher praising a pupil, my first pat from anyone but my parents. Was I just a little sister, a student? A fool with forbidden hopes? Something sprouted between us, but I feared tending it, afraid the bloom wouldn't match my dreams, or worse, would surprise me. Once impulsive, I now froze, unsure if I feared him, myself, or that single step across our line. Self-loathing crept in. Autumn chilled into winter, then spring bloomed post-exams. Our closeness deepened, he must have sensed my feelings. We mirrored each other's thoughts. One step, yet more than a step. My parents somehow learned of us, berating me to leave him. I didn't argue, feeling betrayed, were they prejudiced too? Classmates, especially dorm mates, found out, impossible to hide, nor did I try. They called me foolish. Only he remained. When had he become my anchor? When had he eclipsed everyone in my heart? When had his well-being outranked mine? I wasn't wading into quicksand, I'd leapt, sinking with him. I'd gladly drown together, but I was yanked away, torn from our shared abyss. Sorry, I tried to tell you, but couldn't show you the letters. Now I must. Next month, my family's moving to America, for good. My world flipped, as in that crash, everything shattered in a blink. Yet I wrote calmly, asking when, why. His uncle lived there, his parents had long planned it, better welfare for the disabled, a brighter future for him. Fate's design? To split us before we gave too much? God miscalculated, we'd already given everything. That month, I mastered living as a husk. Should we be together? Shouldn't we? The question dissolved. It wasn't should, it was can't. Chapter 5, The Weight of Farewell. The day Percival left, I discovered that 45 minutes could stretch into an eternity. Had he not forbidden it so fiercely, I'd have skipped class to see him off at the airport. In the classroom, my mind wandered, earning me too. Reprimands to answer questions, both times, I stood mute, words lost. By the final period, I didn't even bother with my books. My heart wasn't there, even if the teacher had recited the final exam answers, I'd have heard nothing. When the bell rang, I abandoned my belongings and bolted, hailing a taxi outside the school gates. If he saw me darting into traffic, he'd scold me for recklessness, but to reach the airport sooner, I'd risk another hospital stay gladly. At the International Departures Hall, I spotted him instantly, though only his back. That silhouette was unmistakably his. I lunged forward, but a tour group swarmed in, blocking my path. Peering through bobbing heads, I saw him heading towards some gate, number unknown. Panic clawed at me. Tears threatening as he drifted further away. I cursed the wretched group, why now, of all times? May their trip be cursed with storms and hail, stranding them nowhere. I wanted to shout his name, imagining he'd pause, turn at my voice, and smile gently as I flung myself into his arms. But the sound lodged in my throat. I knew, even if I screamed myself hoarse, he'd never hear. The group finally dispersed, and I sprinted, less a romantic leap than a clumsy collision, nearly toppling him. He turned, not from my unheard call, but the impact. His intended smile faltered as he saw the moisture in my eyes, shifting to concern. My voice had stuck, but not my tears. From his bag, he pulled a tissue pack, not handing it over, but wiping my face himself, tender and deliberate. I fished his notebook and pen from his pocket. Are you leaving now? Wasn't it a 2 o'clock flight? I'm not going yet. You're lying, I saw you heading out. He must have grasped why I wept, pointing to a restroom near the gate. A misunderstanding. I stemmed my tears, I didn't want him distressed over me. Go then. I'm fine. Looking like this, how can I leave? I'll manage on the plane. He gazed at me, I gazed back. Embarrassment crept in, crying made me hideous, yet he studied me so intently. I knew he was memorizing me, etching my image into his mind, just as I was with him. We stared, unwilling to break away. If time could freeze, I'd beg him to stay, America be damned, I'd be with him forever. Whether he heard or turned at my call didn't matter, so long as he stayed. But that was as impossible as silencing the ambulance siren had been, only now, the impossibility carried a mournful hue. A tap on his shoulder broke our trance. A middle-aged man and woman stood there, his parents. "Hello, you must be Lysandra," the man said. "Thank you for looking after our son." Flustered, I hadn't expected this introduction. "Hello, uncle, aunt, I'm sorry, I didn't see you earlier." I'd been locked in their son's gaze, weeping shamelessly before them, mortifying. Yet I'd do it again. "You're a lovely girl," his mother said. "Not at all, you're too kind." My limbs flailed awkwardly, Percival smirked beside me. "Flight XXXYY to New York, USA, is about to depart. Passengers, please proceed to Gate Z immediately." The announcement rang like a death knell, my nerves fraying. His father signed too. It was time. Percival looked at me, then wrote in his notebook, tore out the page, folded it, and scribbled on the outside before handing it over, "Read the inside after I'm gone." I nodded. He bent down, enveloping me in a tight embrace. I clung back. Releasing me, he grabbed his luggage and forced a smile, one I mirrored, both of us masking tears. His parents bid me farewell, and he turned toward the gate. I watched until he vanished into the crowd, never once looking back. My silent screams couldn't reach him; had they, he'd have turned, promising to stay. Comics and novels lied, telepathy was a myth. In Witch's condition. Did Takizawa really sense Matsushima's call and run back? No wonder Japanese dramas were deemed unrealistic. Reality was us, two arcs of a circle, joined yet destined to part. No rule said a whole must stay intact. That's fate, that's reality. Story characters claim destinies in their hands, a writer's wishful balm for a world where none defy it. We don't live in tales, we live here. So we parted, not a breakup, for we'd never begun, and without a start, there's no end. In the days after, I drowned myself in excess, eating, drinking, splurging on dorm mates at KFC, more generous than ever. They called it grief turned appetite, I laughed it off. Nonsense. Men are everywhere, lose one, find a better one. Next time, I'll snag a stunner for you all to see. Pitying glances followed, they thought me heartbroken. Kidding, I'm not sad, I insisted. I didn't cry, didn't even feel sorrow. I told myself I'd lost men before, feelings fade with the next. My parents, thrilled, took me out to celebrate. That weekend, they shopped while I stayed home, flipping channels. Entertainment shows were the only draw, until some fool cued Wishing Upon a Star. Richie Wren's blind and mute character nodded and waved, unlike Percival, who preferred pen talk. Wren's brooding didn't match Percival's teasing grins. Wren played the sax, Percival couldn't hear a note but painted his soul. When Cecilia Chung's raspy "no reason to be strong" hit, my own resolve crumbled, tears fell, sparing my heart from breaking instead. At the airport, his note had read, "You asked what it's like to hear nothing." I said it felt like nothing. Now I know, it's heartbreak. The worst pain is not hearing your cries. Find the happiness I can't give you elsewhere, but with a good man, so I can rest easy. Classmates said I was grief-stricken. Kidding, I'm fine, I'd shot back. If only it were just sadness. Damn Cecilia and her soulful crooning, I reached for the remote but couldn't find it. Her voice flooded the air, my heart, I'll control myself, let no one see me cry/pretend I don't care, refuse to think of you, curse my cowardice/heartaching, breathless, no trace of you left/watching you helplessly as you vanish to the world's end/no reason to be strong, no warmth of yours to feel/tell me where the stars end, if there's an edge/I'll wish to the sky that you know I love you. I'd lost man before, new feelings shifted, yet no next could erase him. He wasn't forgettable. Because it was him. Chapter 6, Echoes Across the Distance. I never emailed the address he gave me. Writing felt like our true talks, keyboards reduced me to drivel, so I gave up. Maybe he felt the same, or was too busy settling in. He sent nothing either. My heart stayed hollow. Later, I met a guy, a fellow novel buff. We clicked fast. The friend who introduced us hinted he liked me. I wondered, if I wrote Percival about a boyfriend, what would he do? So I asked this guy out. Gave him gifts. He caught on, inviting me for a chat one night, only to steer me to a dark spot and lunge. I shoved him off, realizing I wasn't as open as I'd claimed. Not just anyone would do. My prankster streak persisted. I emailed Percival, gushing about my new boyfriend, how perfect we were, avoiding any speech verbs. A harmless tease, not harm. I haunted the internet cafe daily after school. But no reply came. Was he pranked, or was I? 2 weeks in, I quit, checking only weekends at home. Still nothing. I caved, emailing that it was a joke, no such guy. A month passed, 2, 3, silence. Had he forgotten me? Finals loomed, I pulled all-nighters, passed, then summer hit. On Chishi, Lover's Day, they aired the Butterfly Lovers again, that overplayed classic. My tomboyish streak mirrored Zhu Yingtai's cross-dressing bravado, Percival's quiet grace echoed Liang Shanhua. But our era differed, no forced betrothals or locked rooms from my parents, just half a globe between us. Even if I crashed into a wall and turned butterfly, I couldn't flutter 17,000 kilometers to my Liang. My mantra rang, theory's theory, reality's reality. I loved tragic tales, when others starred. For me, it had to end happily. An eagle, not a butterfly, might tempt me to test that wall. Winter break passed, school resumed, and mid-autumn crept up. This year, I ate only lotus seed mooncakes, cutting them tiny as he once did. The cloying sweetness and hated yolk mingled, 2 bites, and tears flowed. He'd never done grand, storybook gestures, but his gentle care, like those precise cuts, pierced me, and I sobbed aloud. That festival, my parents' puzzled stares followed me as I clutched the mooncake box, weeping incessantly. Tears seasoned the cakes, sweet or salty, I couldn't tell, nor whether tears or lotus outweighed the other. I devoured 3 boxes alone, ones no one else wanted. I cursed mid-autumn's annual return, why not every 4 years like February 29th? My longing might fit then, not spill over uncontrollably. But if longing bent to will, it wouldn't be longing. TV volume dwindled unconsciously until others pointed out the mute. I drank the bitterest herbal tea, crying as an excuse to shoo friends. I lingered at crosswalks, needing his safety to proceed. I'd sense him beside me, turn, and find nothing, a hollow ache, a helpless void. He'd vanished, yet not truly, I knew he lived on Earth's far side. Could I leave him? He'd seeped into my days, melted into my being. Once, I'd been tough, basketball bruises, parental scolds, peer misunderstandings, shrugged off with a laugh. Now, I was frail beyond belief. He'd been right, the majority's view wasn't truth. This fragility didn't fade with time, as they claimed, it grew, threatening not to harden, but to shatter. Love might be a parabola, thrown by one, caught by another. But I tossed and retrieved it, joy and sorrow mine alone. He bore his giving, not my burden. In 21 years, our 9 months and 13 days became my all. I regretted not choosing him, yet feared a deeper pain had I. But meeting him? Never a regret. Sleepless nights multiplied. Alone in bed, I'd wonder, should I forget him? Shouldn't I? Like, should we be together? Shouldn't we? Before. Now, a choice without answers, none existed. As long as I pondered, forgetting was impossible. Then I resolved, I'd find him. He'd given me his address for letters, deeming them too costly, email was cheaper, he'd said. I'd planned letters but, spitefully, opted to surprise him. Travel agencies quoted over 20,000 yuan, a fortune. I took frantic part-time jobs, but school days and night shifts yielded little. 1,000 a month meant 2 years. Despairing, a friend connected me to a magazine editor who'd read my short stories. Knowing my need, he offered serials in 2 magazines, 80 yuan per 1,000 words. I wrote fast, 5,000 words daily. I sent him letters and emails, unanswered, fueling my resolve. Obsessed with reaching America, my novels poured out, earning a newcomer award, a windfall hastening my savings. 4 months later, I boarded a plane. A 21-year-old with rotten English, alone to the other side of the world, lying to my parents about a Guangxi trip, what could be matter? And now, I was off to see the man who drove me to this madness. Chapter 7, Across the Divide. The flight from Hong Kong to New York departed at 2 in the afternoon, a 16-hour journey that crossed the international date line. Leaving in daylight, I arrived at 5 in the afternoon, time warped, yet the marvel of it barely stirred me. Gazing out the window as we passed that invisible boundary, I saw a vista straight from a comic book, but without Percival beside me, it held no charm. His absence dulled the world. In New York, I learned solo excursions weren't standard. After relentless pleading, I convinced the tour guide to let me visit a friend, though he warned me to stay cautious and flagged down a taxi for me. The city wasn't the chaotic sprawl of TV tales, nor the gleaming dream I'd imagined, more like Guangzhou, familiar yet foreign. I showed the driver Percival's address. He dropped me in a suburban sprawl, a name I couldn't catch with my shaky English. Before I stepped out, I asked which house. He pointed to one on my right. Thanking him, I hefted my lone backpack and approached. A stand-alone villa greeted me, white walls, red brick roof, like a fairy tale cottage from my novel-addled mind. I cast myself as the heroine seeking her prince, but unease gnawed at me. Why? Hadn't he replied to my letters or emails? Had something happened? Had he found someone else? I feared the former most, that dread drove me here. If he was hurt, I needed to be by his side. At the door, I steadied my breath, bracing for grim news from his parents. I had to be strong. I pressed the bell. Footsteps approached, and the door creaked open. I fixed my gaze, ready to greet them, only to find Percival himself staring back. Shock froze me. His expression was beyond disbelief, a kaleidoscope of emotions too complex for words, as if I were a mirage. I'd never hinted at my arrival in my messages. Under his intense stare, guilt prickled. Had my unannounced visit crossed a line? My eyes darted downward left, and I nearly bolted. But as I turned, his hand snagged my backpack, pinning me like a rabbit caught by a hunter. I followed him inside, wilting under his stern gaze, brows furrowed, face otherwise a mask. I'd never seen him angry, seemingly was my best guess, given his poker face. Held steady save for that crease. He wore a black long-sleeve sweater, accentuating his pale skin, now even whiter. He'd thinned. Did he miss me, or was it the foreign climate? Yet his complexion glowed healthier than before. They say overseas air and water work wonders, it seemed true. Most importantly, he was safe, no accidents, no tragedies. From my overactive imagination. Unlike the heroine in Love You So Much, who met disaster abroad and lost her love, this wasn't a story. Reality spared us that cliché. I stole glances, while feigning contrition, head bowed, a chastised child begging forgiveness from a stern teacher. We sat at the kitchen table, him to my right. His parents were absent, out, perhaps. I tugged his sleeve, pleading silently for his anger to fade. He sighed, resigned, and pulled out his notebook. How did you get here? Not why, but how. He'd likely guessed my motive. A girl crossing the world alone stunned him more than my purpose. With a tour group, I wrote. Why ditch them to come here? I came for you, not sightseeing. He sighed again, eyeing me. Do your parents know? I told them I'm touring Guangxi with friends. You came with friends? No, solo with the group. His frown deepened. How much did it cost? About 30,000. From your parents, he scratched it out, realizing I'd never ask them for that much. Where'd the money come from? Part-time work. He slammed the table, startling me. Now he wasn't just seemingly angry, he was livid. If he could speak, he'd be roaring. He couldn't fathom an ungraduated student earning nearly 20,000 in under a year. How, exactly? Really from work, I'm not lying. He searched my eyes, hand trembling. Did he suspect something shady? What work? I wrote novels for magazines, won an award. Prize money, fees, some for my parents, plus savings. He propped his head in his hand, brows easing, then yanked me into a fierce embrace. Was he moved? A girl toiling 5 months, spending 30,000. To reach him in a strange land? I shut my eyes, letting 9 months of longing dissolve in his warmth. I'd pay it again for this moment. He held me long before releasing me, studying my face. "You've lost weight," he wrote. Me? I was going to say that about you. To fund this trip, I'd skimped to 1 meal a day, juggling 12-hour stretches of study and work. Slimming was inevitable. I sidestepped, turning the tables. "I sent you emails and letters, did you get them?" "Yes." "Why no reply?" My turn to frown. He pondered, pen hovering. A pause. "Your first email said you had a boyfriend. I tried to congratulate you, but the words wouldn't fit. I realized I couldn't let go as I'd claimed. I didn't want you with anyone else, hugged, cared for by another. Selfish. I know, I can't give you happiness yet cling to you. That selfishness could ruin you. I thought harsh words might make you hate me, but I couldn't hurt you. So I stayed silent, hoping you'd forget me and find joy elsewhere." He wrote haltingly, wrestling with his confession. "If I'd known you'd come, I'd have replied, told you to move on." I cut him off, throwing my arms around him. Tears welled, spilling over. I didn't want him to see, knowing it'd pain him, but I couldn't hold back. Memories flooded, him slicing mooncakes, lost in thought at the restaurant, his warm hand pulling me from the crash site, his misty eyes at the airport. How could I tell this gentle, self-doubting boy I loved him, deaf or mute? It didn't matter. No one could love me more, nor he find someone who loved him as I did. Life entwined with hearing and speaking, but love didn't need voiced vows or heard promises, it lived in the heart. I locked eyes with him, he tried to look away. I cupped his face, forcing his gaze. Closing my eyes, I brushed his warm lips with mine. He stared. Stunned, did he feel my unspoken words, my love? He glanced downward left, then, resolute, pulled me close, eyes shutting as he kissed me back. His first kiss to me. Did he finally grasp my depth of feeling? I'd seek no other, I loved him. His kiss was clumsy, like my ex's, marking me his first. With them, I'd recited tang poetry in my head to endure their sloppy, endless attempts. With him, though unskilled, I reveled in it. Up close, his long lashes struck me, unfair for a man to outshine me there. They fluttered, he opened his eyes, catching me staring. A slight frown, then his left hand covered my eyes, such a chauvinist, demanding I close them. Time blurred, long or brief, it ended reluctantly. His shy flush sparked my mischief. I scribbled, "Pure boy, your first kiss, huh? Sorry I stole it. Haha. P.S. Your technique's awful, practice that tongue." I stuck out mine for good measure. I meant to rile him, he always played the mature 3 years older card, treating me like a kid. His face blazed apple red, he shot up, startling me. Before I could guess his intent, he scooped me up, striding from the kitchen, up the stairs, and into a room on the left, his, unmistakably. White walls bore waist-high painted grasslands, a green carpet sprawled beneath a muraled tree, its branches stretching to the ceiling, a savanna haven. White furniture, bed, desk, computer stand, chair, reflected his love for simplicity. Awestruck, I landed on his feather-soft bed. Even a child could guess his next move. He grinned, wicked, triumphant, a retaliation for my taunt. His gentle kiss disarmed me, improved with tentative tongue work. Promising, I thought, then jolted. His hand slid under my shirt. I'd shed my jacket. At the door, now he tugged at my sweater. My body stiffened, kissing was familiar, but this was my first time beyond. Fear mingled with desire, I didn't resist. He touched me, and I ached to touch him. They say it hurts the first time, I prayed for his gentleness, though with him, it was a given. No one kinder existed, if it hurt with him, it'd be worse with anyone else. I clung to that, easing my nerves. His lips grazed my neck, my collarbone, lower, and my heart thundered. I gripped his neck, urging him on. Then, downstairs, a door opened. Voices followed. His parents. I flailed, he blinked, clueless. I grabbed bedside paper, I hear the door, your parents are back. He leapt up, panic mirroring mine. Shirtless, pants intact, we were still a mess. He draped my shed blouse over me. As he hunted his sweater, his parents reached the doorway. What to do? Hi, uncle, aunt. I chirped weakly. They froze, eyes darting between me and their half-clad son, piecing it together. His father whacked Percival's head with a rolled newspaper, hard, judging by his wince and frantic rubbing. A new expression, aggrieved, lips twisted, beyond his usual blank or smiling mask. Sorry. Our rotten son did this to you, his father said, mortified. They apologized profusely. I demurred, I consented, a co-conspirator. His father signed furiously, scolding, I assumed, then barked him downstairs. His mother followed with gentler gestures, perhaps defending me, before landing another head smack and shooing him off. I stifled laughter at his sulky retreat. Sorry about him, she sighed. Get dressed, we'll wait downstairs. The clothes, not torn, right? No, aunt, don't worry. She pictured him a brute, downstairs promised no peace for him. Alone, I burst out laughing. His petulant pout was a rare gem, always the lecturing adult, yet a child before them. A clever girl files that away for future teasing. On his bed, I felt the warmth he slept in nightly. What did he think here? Of me, as I did him? The room was sparse, where were his paintings? Another studio, perhaps. Chapter 8, Bonds Beyond Words. Dressed, I descended to find his parents on the sofa, Percival absent. Lysandra, you're down, they exclaimed, guilt-laden and overly polite. Apologizing again. I insisted nothing happened, unfinished didn't lessen their view of the offense. His straight-laced nature clearly ran in the family. Finally, I asked where he was. Cooking in the kitchen, his mother said. Cooking? News to me, I dashed to see. He stood at the counter, back to the door. I tapped his shoulder, he turned, and I flashed a sly grin. You were hilarious up there, pure boy. He glared, ignoring me. So meek with your parents, usually you're smug, lecturing me. I mimed a cackle. No response, he resumed slicing meat. What are you making? Can I help? As I wrote, he rapped my head. I yelped, what the? Then paled. I'd vowed never to speak alone with him. Habit betrayed me. He hadn't noticed, smirking triumphantly. Relieved, I feigned outrage, adding an arrow, that's too much. I offered help. He wiped his hands. Forget it, you'd make it worse. No way. I cook at home all the time. Then your family stocked on stomach meds. Nonsense. It's not gourmet, but it's edible. They've built iron guts from practice, mine haven't. Keep talking, his father interrupted. Lysandra, why were you here? Ignore this punk, I'll sit with you outside. Dinner soon. Kindly said, he turned, signing sharply at Percival, pulling me out. I caught Percival's sidelong glance, helpless. Poor thing, I thought. Dinner dazzled, a spread I couldn't believe he'd crafted. A note slid under my nose, stop staring, foods for eating, not eyeballing. Classic Percival. I rolled my eyes, sitting at his father's invitation. Square table, him on my right, parents opposite. I tasted the fish, delicious. So good. I blurted. He caught my lips moving, set down his chopsticks for the notebook, but his father intervened. No writing at meals, he signed and said. Percival relented, though his eyes lingered, curious. I pointed to the fish, my chewing mouth, then gave a thumbs up. He nodded, mind cooking, raised a smug brow, and mirrored my gesture. Of course it's good, I made it. Even without signs or words, we spoke. We shared a sneaky laugh, baffling his parents. After, they watched TV while we lingered at the table. Sorry about today, I got carried away, he wrote. What? No need. I didn't resist, it's not all on you. Girls care a lot about their first time, don't they? Sure, but if it's you, I blushed, stalling, unsure how to finish. He caught on, I pivoted. I just worry it'll hurt. Does it hurt a lot? For the guy or girl? Obviously the girl, idiot. If it's you hurting, I wouldn't mind. Oh. You don't need to write, oh, dummy. Oh. He glanced away, teasing me. I huffed. How long are you in New York? 2 days. Got an itinerary? Show me. I handed him the sheet from my backpack. New York, Philadelphia, Washington, Louisiana, Vegas, San Francisco, 12 days total. Arrived New York at 4 p.m., hotel tonight. Tomorrow, city tour, then a 7 p.m. bus to Philly. 1 day there, 1.5 in D.C., flight to L.A. for 3 days, Vegas 1, San Fran 2, back to L.A. for the return. He studied it, decided. You rejoin the group tomorrow morning? Yeah. Guide gave me 1 night off. I'll go with you. You'll come? He nodded. But is that allowed? Explain it to the guide tomorrow, it'll be fine. Which flight from D.C. to L.A.? Not sure, guide has the tickets. Got his number? Yeah, he gave it today. Call and ask, I'll book the same flight. Why? LA's 5 hours away. He met my eyes. You flew 16 hours across the world for me, 5's nothing. Speechless, I dialed, he had his father book the ticket. Sorry you're spending more to join me. Compared to your 30,000, it's trivial. Still, I'm glad I came, I worried you'd had an accident, not replying. Sorry. But seeing all these sides of you makes it worth it. What sides? You. Before, just 3 looks, blank, unreadable, smiling, for greetings or good moods, laughing, teeth out, when you're thrilled. Or pranking me. Now, shock, anger, and that priceless sulk when your parents whacked you. You should have seen yourself, hilarious. I giggled as I wrote, he squirmed, embarrassed. I've never seen you laugh big, what's that like? He ignored me, typical dodge when cornered. Hey, man up, don't clam up when I hit a nerve. Ungentlemanly. Still nothing. Says the guy who treats me like a kid, he's the child. He glared, then bolted to the sofa. I pounced, draping over his neck. Sorry, I'll stop, stingy. Apologizing or mocking? Apologizing. Don't ignore me. He flashed that toothy grin, hugged me, and sat me on his lap, 3 seconds before his father's hand cracked his head again, signing him off me. I took the sofa beside him, stifling laughter. Your dad always smacks your head? Yeah, since I was little, always from behind. Mom picked it up too. I complained it'd make me dumb, he said it activates brain cells, if I'm ever a fool, it's not from that. I lost it, tugging his sleeve as we snickered. Oh, I brought Guangdong goodies as a gift. I dug out 4 packs of his dreaded 24-herb tea, thrusting them over. His joy curdled, eyes bulging. Uncle, Aunt, I figured you can't get this here, a Guangdong specialty. 4 packs, enough to drive him mad. I cackled inwardly. That night, he offered me his bed, taking the guest room. I refused, staying awake, demanding he chat. It's late, you're up early tomorrow. Don't care. Stay. No, sleep, or you'll be wrecked. Then sleep with me. I pouted pitifully, knowing he'd cave. I needed his arms to feel safe after so long apart, I'd give him everything if he asked. No way, you want me scolded? Don't care, just stay, or I won't sleep. He ruffled his hair, relenting. Fine, but just sleep. He'd guessed my twist, sharp. I bathed, changed, and lay down, he perched on the headboard. I insisted he join me fully, none of that slipping away after I sleep, nonsense. He complied, tense, flinching at every shadow, terrified of parental wrath. Adorable, he looked the kid now. I hugged his left arm tight, thwarting escape, and relaxed against his shoulder. Exhausted from the day, I drifted off, grip unyielding. Morning found him still there, joy surged. He slept like a kitten, an odd fit for a 6-foot man, yet apartment. He'd tried breaking free overnight, failing against my hold. Watching him, his deafness and silence faded, another boy at peace. I kissed his cheek. I loved this man beyond parting, I wanted this kittenish slumber, beside me every dawn. His hair, longer now, untrimmed since leaving, veiled his face. I brushed it aside, tracing his lashes, brows, nose, lips, neck. What reason could I find not to love him? 9 months together, 9. Apart, and here I was again. His hair fell, I swept it back. He stirred, frowning, shifting. I couldn't resist, blowing in his ear. He squirmed, but I persisted until he woke, spotting my impish grin. A glance, eyes shut, then a jolt upright. He checked the clock, 6:30, sighing relief, still fearing discovery. Sitting, he kissed me, his third, ruffled his bedhead, and pointed downstairs. Leaving after my nod. His parents slept on. I washed up, joined him below as he prepped breakfast. We ate, left a portion with a note for them, and headed to my tour's hotel. Chapter 9, A Journey Shared. Our tour group numbered 19. I'd called the guide last night, explaining we'd cover our own sightseeing costs and pleading to include Percival. Sympathetic, perhaps picturing us as star-crossed lovers torn apart, he agreed readily. When I arrived with Percival, a girl my age darted over, whispering, "Your boyfriend? He's so handsome." "Where'd you meet?" "Handsome?" I glanced at him. "Decent." "Sure, but handsome?" My bar was sky-high from comics and novels, flawless heroes skewing my standards. "You don't need to whisper," I said. "He can't hear." "Can't hear? Bad ears?" Well, I hesitated. Revealing this might draw odd looks, which he'd hate. But over days together, it'd surface anyway. "He can't hear or speak." I avoided deaf and mute, even unheard, they felt like slurs. "What? He's deaf-mute? And you're with him?" Her voice spiked, broadcasting it to all. I frowned, annoyed. "Sorry, we're boarding," I muttered, pushing past her to tug him onto the bus. Her outburst turned every eye on him. Did they think me odd? Was it so strange to love someone who couldn't hear or speak? As we began our pen talk, heads craned to peek. I glared, they retreated, only to creep back. "Stop glaring, let them look," he wrote. "How'd you know?" "I'm used to it. They're curious. They'll adjust soon." "Used to it? Always these weird stares?" "I hate it." "It's not about hate. You'd stare too at a one-legged man on the street, pure curiosity, rare sights. You don't think how the watched feel." I bowed my head, caught. I was no different, swap places, and I'd gawk at this odd couple too. "Sorry. No need. It's human nature. I won't anymore. Being with you showed me how absurd I was." He kissed my forehead. Eyes flicked our way, "Fine, stare all you want." He liked me, I liked him, that trumped everything. Let these gawkers puzzle over us, they'd never grasp our love. We hit Central Park, Times Square, Manhattan, Chinatown, the Statue of Liberty, and the World Trade Center site. The statue was off limits. Post-attack, but the rest thrilled us. At Ground Zero, after a silent tribute, he wrote, "Some survivors lost hearing from the blasts." "Different," I replied. "Not just that yours is congenital, there's accidental. It's your place in my heart that sets you apart. I'd pity others, help them, but I love you. That's the difference." He didn't respond, just pressed my head to his shoulder. At dinner, I wanted us alone, away from prying eyes. He insisted it was fine, rare to dine with fellow Cantonese abroad, why waste it? The guide urged me to, group fun beats solo gloom, so I relented. They chattered and laughed, he heard none. Quietly peeling my shrimp, cutting my steak. When a shrimp shell nicked my hand, he rushed me to disinfect and bandage it. Their uproarious jokes sparked his polite smiles, joining in despite not knowing why. Seeing him force it twisted my gut. "You don't have to strain for me," I wrote post-meal. "I'm not." "You laugh without knowing why, just mimicking them." "That's forcing it." "It's not. I don't need the joke, seeing joy makes me happy." "But." He snatched the pen. "No buts. You're here to enjoy, not fuss over me. Relax and have fun." Later, he led me to a nearby gallery, hundreds of paintings, a few his own. Unlike his hospital watercolors, these oils were breathtaking, prices starting at $200, over 1,000 yuan. "All yours?" "Yeah, some sold, can't show you those." "You can sign here?" "Yep. The owner's my uncle's friend." "Wow, a real painter." He chuckled. "Not amazing. You're a real novelist. Me? Just a hobbyist. Same here, painting's a side gig. But $200 apiece. You earned over 10,000 in months. Anyone can write, oils are rare. You're incredible. Stop praising me. You could live off this. No, it's extra. I've got a steady job. Job? You work? Yeah, drawing architectural renderings at a firm. You studied architecture? In college. I stepped back, dazzled. A remarkable man, and I'd been clueless. I'd been with someone amazing and didn't know. Enough flattery, I can't take it. Not flattery, truth. He blushed, hand over mouth, glancing away. So cute, I wrote, 3 times. He snapped, tugging my cheeks outward. I stopped laughing, he grinned, pointing at my cute trio, earning a playful punch. He introduced the owner, a laid-back Chinese man in his 30s. When I marveled at Percival's prices, he said, he won't let buyers. No, he's disabled, could fetch more. Americans admire resilience, if he shared, prices would soar. I've suggested it, but he refuses. I nodded silently. I knew him too well. Next, we bust to Philly. Prone to motion sickness, worsened by unfamiliar food, I vomited relentlessly. He tended me, letting me rest on his lap. At the hotel, he booked a room 2 floors above mine. My roommate, the chatty girl, gushed, he's deaf-mute but so attentive, it's touching. I'd want a guy like that. No wonder you love him. Touching? How could it not be? He always gave so much, my rare efforts for him drew double in return. I gave 10, he gave 20. No better man existed. Most, like her, might approach him for looks, then ditch him for his disability. Did he see me as different? I wasn't drawn by his face or repelled by his silence, I saw his heart's unique beauty first, falling. Slowly. I'd craved the extraordinary, special events, people. Was he that? In my heart, unmatched. Was I in his? Then I was special too. Once torn over us, now it didn't matter, I just wanted him. My sole wish. Chapter 10, The Final Stretch. From Philly to DC, then LA, Vegas, and San Fran, he cared for me flawlessly. As days slipped by, his reluctance grew palpable. At Disneyland, I demanded a life-size doll. Too big to take home, smaller, okay? No. Life-sized. Why so big? To hug it as you at night. He blushed, adorably predictable. I started, so cute, but he yanked the notebook away. He settled on a huggable Mickey, not life-sized. I didn't say it was also for tears on lonely nights. Our parting loomed, uncertain when we'd reunite. The last night, my roommate swapped her double for his single, a rare kindness. He passed her a thank you note, she blushed, later admitting up close he was really handsome. I didn't see it, too accustomed, perhaps. His inner virtues outshone any exterior, endless to count. We stayed up, chatting. Be careful going back, he wrote. You too. Don't assume Guangzhou's safe, taxi straight home from the airport. I'll email, you reply. He hesitated. What? You really want someone like me? What are you saying? You tell others not to mind your flaws, yet you do. But. His gaze dimmed, I grabbed the pen. Fine, I'll get surgery, pierce my eardrums. He gasped, alarmed. No. You can't, don't even think it. Would you like me deaf-mute? Promise you won't, then I'll answer. Answer first, then I'll promise. I'm stubborn too. Fine. I'd like you. But I prefer you as you are. You're lying. He blinked, confused. Even deaf, limbless, you'd love me the same. You said prefer now, to stop me. Don't you get it? I'm the same. Hearing, speaking's better, but it doesn't change my love, any you, I love. He stared at my words, silent. So, you'll reply to my emails and letters now? He caught my ear-piercing ploy, a trap to make him see, to commit. I will. If you don't, I'll storm here and spook you. I'll reply, don't come. Too far. Want me? I'll fly to Guangzhou. Far for me, not you? Not that, you alone worries me. You coming doesn't? I'm a guy, what's to worry? I'd worry. What if you're in an accident? A car honks, you don't hear, hit? Something falls from above? Robbers strike a bank you're in? What if? Tears cut me off, since him, my once dry eyes wept too easily. He held me, my sobs soaking his shoulder. His eyes glistened too. I don't want to part, I want forever with him. Who could grant love across borders? Doraemon's anywhere door, lend me one? Invisible divides of ability already split us, now visible distance stretched vast. How could I stay with him, keep loving this boy I adored? Our last tour day, we barely noticed the sights, hands clasped tight, never letting go. On the airport bus, we skipped writing. What more to say? I loved him, he loved me, we knew. At the gate, we faced each other. He smiled, pinched my cheek, wanting my grin. I forced one, hollow. Did he see my heart weeping? The guide called, I turned, walking away, his gaze burning my back. Last time, I'd sent him off, craving his glance back. Now he sent me. I halted, spun around, 20 meters apart, passers-by flickering between. Leave like this? No. Courage surged, I screamed, I like you. Eyes swiveled, let them stare, I didn't care. I love you. Hearing or not, I love you. I'll never love another. If you dare love someone else, I won't forgive you. My voice shredded, not to bridge 20 meters to his ears, but to pierce his heart. He stood, stunned. Did he only see my shouting, no sound reaching? Could he hear? Feel it? He watched, long and still, then, first time ever, opened his mouth, shouting back. What? What did he say? I love you too. I'll never love another? Even hemispheres apart, I'm with you? Seeing him strain, I prayed, God, please, let me hear him. Why, with such effort, was there no sound? Tears flooded, his mute cry moved me beyond words. This man I loved knew no speech, no sound's essence, yet spoke now, voiceless words, declaring his love. Sobbing, I boarded, clutching his Mickey, window seat. Some might tell their families of a Chinese girl yelling at LAX. Chinese speakers might say she confessed. None would know all heard me, but the man I loved, deaf to every word. Yet he felt it, answering in silence. Home, I'd email him, after graduating, when I'm strong and independent, I'll fly to him, never parting again. I'd keep practicing calligraphy, my handwriting improved over 9 months, a silly devotion now worthwhile. I'd learned sign language, he'd said it wasn't needed, but now it was, for a lifetime together. I'd master English, memorize every word I'd failed, be his ears and voice. Sorry, Mom, Dad. Liking Tai loved Shambhua over a finer suitor, I chose him. They saw his flaws as barriers to my happiness, blind to him being my happiness. Where else could I find such love, or love so fiercely? 90% of the world lacked his defects, yet I loved him. I wasn't Ing Tai, he wasn't Shambhua, no grave crashing, no butterflies, but I'd crossed 17,000 kilometers for my Liang. Loyalty and filial piety clashed, I'd be the unfaithful daughter, leaving family and nation for him. Fate wasn't ours to wield, we only had our love. No man loved me more, no woman him. If this plane crashed? I didn't want death, but I'd die content. Amid LAX clamor, I heard one voice, his, saying, I love you. The end.